Well, I have a couple of thoughts I wanted to share with you today, but I thought we'd sit first and just do our practice. All right, so take your position, whatever that might be, for meditation. You might just connect right now with showing up here today, appreciating that you've shown up. The commitment and determination you have to practice. Connecting with the body now. We often forget we have a body. There is a body. There is a body sitting, and there is a body breathing. Taking some time now, feeling the body from the inside. For some of us, that might mean feeling the breath move in the body. It can sometimes help to feel the touch points of the body, the places where the body is touching something else. The buttocks against the seat, creating some pressure, some heat there. If it's in your practice to take some deeper breaths to help you settle just a bit more, relaxing the body, relaxing the mind. Opening the heart. Feeling both stillness and movement as they happen concomitantly. Maybe finding some new sensations in the body you didn't know that were there. Or if there are sounds around you, allowing them to be there. To be part of the field of experience. Noticing how the sounds and the sensations come and go. like passing clouds. Moving of their own nature. This practice is a combination of allowing, opening, and paying attention. Often we use the word ardent in practicing meditation. In practicing whatever we think Buddhism is, ethical practice, a practice of caring. Practice of wisdom, discernment. Seeing the truth of how things really are. When the mind begins to take over in the different spirals of thoughts, stories, fantasies, catastrophes, memories. Notice that. No need to give yourself a hard time. You might even notice the quality of those experiences, quality of mind, quality of heart. What happens in the body. And see if you can come back to an open awareness. Open to the changing sensations, the changing sensations with breath, or movements happening in the body. changing sounds, or silence. Or the changing of thoughts. Resting inside. Coming back again and again to our intention to practice. To see the truth of how things really are. To cultivate kindness and compassion, equanimity. To know what really matters. If at any point you get lost in thought, just come back to the body. Come back to the breath. Sensing yourself from the inside. And if it's in your practice to bring your palms together in front of your chest, sometimes considered sealing your practice. Gratitude for yourself for showing up, for paying attention, for your wish to awaken and be free of attachments and aversions. To become wiser and more caring. Extending wishes of care outward as far and wide as you can imagine. Perhaps to people that are suffering far more than we are right now in other parts of the world. And then whenever you're ready, feel free to drop your hands, open your eyes. Feel free to move and stretch as your body needs to. Perhaps as some of you or all of you feeling quite concerned about what's happening in the Ukraine, the abject suffering and cruelty that we're seeing pictures of and hearing about, that becomes so hard to reconcile, particularly as our lives seem to go on as normal here. And I too have been struggling with how to reconcile all of that. And I've come across some new teachings to me on what the Buddha named as Samveda and Pasada. So Samveda has many different translations, and it's not something that's often mentioned in the Buddhist teachings. Best I can tell from the little bit I've read, it comes from a kind of existential sense of despair. And I'll read you, let's see. I'll read you just a bit of what I have found to describe it. Let's see. In one description, it's called 3 clusters of feelings: an oppressive sense of shock, dismay, and alienation that comes with realizing the futility and meaninglessness of life as it's normally lived. A chastening sense of our own complicity, complacency, foolishness, and having let ourselves live so blindly. Also, though, an anxious sense of urgency in trying to find our way out. Another meaning I found that the word Samvega comes from a verbal root meaning to tremble or to move in agitation, and is sometimes simply described as fear. It's a special kind of fear that's considered useful and beneficial and has a positive sense relating to the teachings of the Buddha. And this is from Andy Olinsky, a Buddhist scholar. He says, when a lion roars in the forest, all the animals tremble and scurry to their places of refuge. This is not the fear of a helpless victim, but a fear that stirs them to action for their own safety. In the same way, when a Buddha roars out the truth of aging, sickness, and death, the truth of impermanent suffering and non-self, those who are wise are moved by the profound sense of spiritual urgency, called Samveda, which spurs them to follow the teachings and clear their minds of greed, hatred, and delusion before death overcomes them. So I've been thinking that in these times where we're seeing these horrors and feeling perhaps a sense of fear, dismay, the meaninglessness of what's happening, that those feelings, how do we bear them? How do we stay with them and not turn away? It's said that these teachings came about when the Buddha left the palace. Many of you would know the story of the Buddha, that he lived amongst great luxury in a palace, and he was being primed to be the king. He was a prince, and only lived with wonderful riches and filling all the sense desires. And that one day he wandered out of the palace, as the mythology goes, and ran into three beings, but actually there's a fourth one. One who was sick, he hadn't seen sickness. One who was dying, and one who had died, a corpse. And he realized this was our ultimate demise. This was our ultimate life experience for all of us. The fourth person he ran into was apparently a wandering renunciate. And he then left the palace, left all his worldly riches, and became a wandering renunciate. Later found out that living as an ascetic was not the way to sort of find freedom from suffering. That's another story. But he was facing the same ultimate life story that we're all facing. And there, of course, are these teachings in Buddhism about facing aging, sickness, and health, death. Because that's simply realistic. That's simply the truth of what happens in our world. But it's not meant to be pessimistic or depressing. It's just the truth. And so how do we face these truths? These truths, I've often wondered, how is it possible to see the carnage that we're seeing that people do to each other? And I often have a hard time coming up with an explanation. I felt the same way when 9/11 occurred, and probably many other atrocities that I didn't pay as much attention to as I am now at this time in my life. So it's said that this quality of Samvega, by at least this scholar, is also called fear. What do we do with our fear? Fear that we might be capable, or human beings are capable of such atrocities, of such cruelness. And this is a part of our world. And so it can evoke a sense of urgency. How do we How do we bear this? How do we stay watching these images? How do we stay connected, involved, and determined? One of the things I was hearing in some teachings today is the one thing we don't let go of in Buddhist practice is our determination to practice. We stay on the path. And I find during these times of real urgency of what's happening to people, a sense of urgency. There's another concept that goes with Samveda called Pasada. And this Pasada is the sense of refuge. What do we do in this when we're facing this sense of urgency? How do we find confidence, clarity? And it often is in resting in what we call the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Buddha being finding our Buddha nature, our nature to awaken, our nature to see the truth of things, our nature to expand our capacity for suffering, because in these lives there's suffering, and our nature to cultivate more kindness, more generosity, patience. The Dharma are the teachings, particularly ethical teachings. We're facing a huge ethical crisis. This quality of pasada is described by Tisanaro, who another Buddhist scholar. Let's see if I can find it here. Pasada, or calm confidence, the balance to Samvega. It's usually translated as clarity or serene confidence. These words are Pali. But like Samvega, Pasada is a complex emotion amounting to mental states that keep Samvega from turning into despair. A way to live that's not futile or meaningless, but positive, fruitful, helpful, and leads to greater wisdom, peace, and compassion. It provides us with some confidence in coping with the overwhelming, depressing, despairing conditions that we're seeing, the capacity to cope with it. And so I have taken some refuge in seeing these capacities in the Ukrainian people, and in particular, the Ukrainian leadership, the Ukrainian president. And his capacity to stay strong and resolute, ardent, determined, to show the world the truth of what's happening. To awaken our sense of ethical practice, of generosity. To do what we can to offer contributions or well-wishing, opening our doors, accepting our small inconveniences of higher food prices and higher gas prices, so we can be more supportive. And so I wanted to kind of open this to some discussion, as I know that this particular happening and what we've seen in these last couple of days about the carnage, the abject cruelty, the inhumanity that we're seeing, how we're coping with that becomes so important, not to turn away, to see it and to cope, to pull together like we do coming to these groups, what we find meaning in. And I ask not only to say what you're thinking, but because I think that as we share these kinds of thoughts, we help each other in becoming more resolute, in cultivating more of this quality of pasada, a sure way out of trouble, an enduring community who support all who seek refuge.